Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Mannor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney Robert Mannor. On today's webinar, Bob will be shedding light on an important topic facing many aging Michigan residents and their families, paying for long-term care. Many families lose everything paying for care, not knowing they have options. These options are so well hidden, they're practically a secret. Stay tuned to learn more. Now, before I pass the torch to Bob, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. First, a quick disclaimer. Today's webinar will be educational, informative. You will definitely learn something new, but you're not going to get specific legal advice for your situation. If you're looking for legal advice, I encourage you to contact us after the webinar so that we can talk with you one-on-one. Now, next, remember that this webinar is recorded. We'll send out a replay link tomorrow that you can share with your family and friends. If you have questions during today's webinar, I encourage you to use the chat box to leave those questions. We'll actually be saving time at the end of today's webinar to go over any questions that you leave in the chat box. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will contact you after the webinar. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Mannor Law Group have to say? First, you should know that we're a nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Mannor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's one of only 19 attorneys in Michigan to achieve this designation. He's currently on the executive board of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Michigan chapter. Lastly, one of my personal favorite reasons, Mannor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome attorney Bob Mannor.
Hi, folks. Well, so I like the topic here today, and one of the things that frustrates me is when I click on a topic that says that they're going to tell me about 3 secrets or 3 things, and they don't immediately tell me what those 3 things are. So I am going to tell you exactly what those 3 things are right from the very beginning here. And the 3 things are how to pay for long-term care. This means nursing home, home care, those types of things. Veterans benefits, nursing home Medicaid, and home care Medicaid. So there's other programs out there, but these are the 3 big ones, and these are the 3 ones that can really make a huge impact on things. So there's different local programs in Genesee County, for example. They have the senior millage that pays for some things. There's some helping services through the area agency on aging. But these are the 3 big ones that can really make a significant difference in making sure that we can protect our spouse and make sure our spouse doesn't become impoverished as a result of our care needs, and be able to protect our house and protect our assets and things like that. So these are the 3 biggest things: veterans benefits, nursing home Medicaid, and home care Medicaid. So we're going to go through those 3 and kind of flesh those out and talk about, well, how can those help? What will they pay? And how do we qualify for those things? Because a lot of times, as soon as somebody sees this word Medicaid here, that they're going to say, oh, well, I don't qualify for that. Sometimes I even hear people say that as it relates to veterans benefits. They hear that and they immediately tune out. I've done a presentation one time, and I tend to listen to people as they come in and go out, and I completed an hour-long presentation all about how we can help people qualify for veterans benefits and Medicaid, even if they have assets, even if they have income. And I heard the person on the way out say, well, I could never qualify for veterans benefits because my income's too high. Nope, that's not the way it works, okay? That's not an answer. And so just because you've been told before, oh, you can't qualify for Medicaid, or you can't qualify your spouse for Medicaid because you have assets or income. All right, well, we're gonna be talking, that's why we kind of call them the secrets here, the hidden things. With any government program, if you know the rules well, you can apply them well in your favor, right? So I often will compare this to, we see rich people that will have, don't pay a lot of taxes. And so how does they do that? Well, often it's because they've got accountants or lawyers making sure that they have things structured right. They're accountants, they're lawyers, they're professionals know the law so well that they can apply the law in their favor. And that's what we're doing as it relates to veterans benefits, nursing home Medicaid, and home care Medicaid. So if you hear out there, oh, well, don't forget that, I call it the barbershop advice. You in the barbershop and somebody says, oh, I'm not sure how to protect my spouse. I'm not sure how to protect my mom or get them the care that they need. And they say, oh, well, you can't have any assets. You have to give everything away. Both of those things are wrong. Number one, don't give everything away. That's probably the worst thing that you could do. Don't give money to your kids and tell them we're going to hide it. That's probably the worst thing you could do. It's also a felony. And secondly, it doesn't mean that you can't have assets, you can't protect assets. So this is a really a key thing to make sure that we have all the options available for us. And so those are the three big things: veterans benefits, nursing home Medicaid, and home care Medicaid. We're going to talk about what each program does, how to qualify for it, how to protect your house, your income, your assets, and still qualify for it and not become impoverished in order to access those things. Just very quickly before I go on, sometimes people will say, well, Bob, I don't know about this. I don't know if I want to qualify for Medicaid. I heard that was, that doesn't seem fair to me, because isn't that supposed to be for people that don't have any money? Well, my answer to that is it's a government program that you've paid into your entire life. And just like Medicare, so there's a difference between Medicare and Medicaid, right? Medicare is your health insurance after age 65 and for some other folks. And people don't have any trouble saying, oh, yes, of course I want to qualify for Medicare. But then they say, well, in Medicaid, well, every paycheck that you've ever earned, they took out money for Medicare and they took out money for Medicaid. The other thing about this is, what's interesting about it is it's in how the government made the decision as to what diseases are going to be covered. So I always give the example for someone that maybe had serious heart problems and they had to do quadruple bypass surgery. And the quadruple bypass surgery, between the surgery and the aftermath of the surgery and the rehab and everything else, could cost $500,000. Who's going to pay the bulk of that? If you're over 65, it's going to be Medicare, right? Medicare and Blue Cross or whoever your insurance is going to pay the bulk of that, $500,000. What if you need long-term care for a year? It's going to cost $100,000 to provide you for around-the-clock care because instead of heart disease, you have Alzheimer's. What does Medicare pay for that? Almost zero, probably zero. What does Blue Cross pay for that? Zero. Okay, so we're evening this out, and it doesn't seem fair to me that if you get one disease, it's pretty much covered and you don't have to be impoverished. But if you get a different disease, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or any of those that require long-term care, all of a sudden they expect you to be impoverished as a result of that. So we're just evening the playing field. And the law allows us to do it. Everything we're doing, the law allows us to do. So let's get right into it. So we created this in my office. This is proprietary for us. It just kind of goes through the different levels of care and the different things about those levels of care. So here's what I mean by this. This was something that we thought was really useful in trying to distinguish what can help pay for what, as well as some other questions. So this is a form that we came up with, and that has been very popular. The clients have liked it, but then I've had lots of attorneys that I showed it to, and they're like, can I get a copy of that? So we're actually going to be presenting this to attorneys throughout the state at the Fall Elder Law Conference through the Institute for Continuing Legal Ed. But it's I think a valuable document that kind of goes through and helps narrow down our options or explain our options. So when we're talking about long-term care, that's where we have this column on the left-hand side. And so we start off with home and independent, obviously. So we don't need any care, we're home and independent. So we don't really need to talk about those. Then we start talking about, well, what about for home, but we need some level of care at some point? What if we move into independent living? Adult foster care. Now, it's kind of a weird word for it, but adult foster care, sometimes adult foster cares are very similar to assisted livings. They're just licensed as adult foster cares. Sometimes adult foster cares are a house in a neighborhood where the residents there, the patients there, eat dinner at a dinner table, at a kitchen table. They have their own bedroom, or they share a bedroom in a regular house. They have a backyard that they can sit out in. Adult foster care homes, I don't like the term because it kind of has negative connotation, but sometimes it can be really nice because it's not living in an institution, right? It's not living in a big, I mean, sometimes the adult foster cares are actually big assisted livings, but sometimes people prefer that, where they're living in a home setting, like a house setting, like in a neighborhood. And so sometimes some of those adult foster cares, you don't even know that it's an adult foster care. You could be driving through a neighborhood and pass two of them and not even know it. Now, sometimes they'll have a sign out front, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just a family that decided that they were going to go into this, and maybe they had a loved one that needed care, and they said, well, if we're caring for this person, maybe we'll care for some other people too. Typically, it's no more than about 10 residents at a time, so sometimes we get from like 3 to 10 residents. Okay, then we go up into the assisted living. Assisted living is actually a category that I specify as different than independent living. So sometimes these things get sort of mixed and mixed. uh, so the independent living, assisted living, and nursing home often get confused for each other, right? So I look at those as different things, and the reason I look at those for different things because there's different things that can help pay for them. So when we're talking about veterans benefits or home Medicaid or nursing home Medicaid, we've got to define what type of place that we're getting the care. Obviously, if it's home care, it's going to be, that's pretty well defined. But if we're getting care outside of the home, first we got to figure out where are we being cared for? What type of facility is it? How is it licensed? Adult foster care, assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing, what I'll often refer to as nursing home. So that second to the last category, skilled nursing facility, is the official name for what I often I'm gonna say nursing home. So if I accidentally slip into calling it a nursing home, know that I mean skilled nursing facility. I don't mean memory care. I don't mean assisted living, and I don't mean independent living or adult foster care. And this may seem boring at this point, but it isn't. This is really important for the distinguishing between what care can we get, what help can we get, what level of care do we need. This is one of the first primary questions that we have to determine when we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with mom or husband or dad or spouse or whatever it is that needs care. A lot of people say, well, they're gonna stay home forever. Well, that's great. Let's plan on that. Let's have a strategy for that. But sometimes that's not the best care. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we can't afford that because sometimes home care can be the most expensive. So we've got to look at these other options. And one of the key things, the starting point, is to look at what level of care do we need and how we're going to pay for it. And so we have to distinguish, is it independent living? Is it assisted living? Is it adult foster care? Is it skilled nursing or nursing home? Obviously, hospital is going to be, a temporary situation. So the first column here is what type of care is involved. The next column is what type of caregivers, how are they licensed? Do they provide 24-hour care? You see the only ones that provide 24-hour care are the skilled nursing or the nursing home and the hospital. Is it locked? Typically, the only ones that are locked are this memory care. In other words, if we have somebody that's a wanderer and we're worried about them wandering away, typically it's only going to be this memory care option. Can we pay with the VA? So this is great because look at this. It's always yes. Here's what except for the hospital. Here's what I mean when it comes to long-term care. We're going to talk about this program through the VA. You have to have been a wartime veteran, so we're going to talk about the dates of service. You don't have to have been served overseas. You don't have to have carried a gun or been anywhere other than the United States, but you have to have served during a specific period of time. But the nice thing about this is that it's cash, okay? So everybody takes cash, right? All of these different facilities, all the different programs, they all take cash. So if the VA is going to give us cash to help pay for care, you see it's yes all the way across the board. Now, why does independent living say sometimes for rent? Sometimes the rent, meaning the room and board, can count as care, but it has some additional requirements that we've got to look at. So it's one of those things that there's just specific rules that we've got to follow. And I'm going to give you some advice really key advice in a second here once we get through the rest of this document. And the key advice is, how do you sort through all this? I'll explain that in a second. All right, so the next one is, can Blue Cross pay? All right, is Blue Cross going to pay? Is Aetna, whatever your health insurance? Obviously, it's not everybody has Blue Cross, but in Michigan, Blue Cross is obviously very popular. So is insurance going to pay? You see, it's always no, except for skilled care. And the skilled care, it's only yes to the extent of the short-term rehab time period. So this yes down here that says it's going to be paid for by Medicare or your health insurance, it's yes for a short period of time, no more than 100 days typically. Typically, you don't get your whole 100 days. Typically, it's going to get cut off before that for various reasons. So if it's long term, if we just need a couple of months or a couple of weeks, yes, as long as we're getting rehab, it might get covered by Blue Cross or by Medicare. But if we need to have longer term care, what do we do after that? Then we're going to be looking at these other three columns. Okay, so you noticed after we did veterans benefits, these last three columns are all Medicaid. So in a minute, we're going to talk about how do you qualify for Medicaid and still not lose all your assets. And that's going to be really important. But you notice all three of these programs are Medicaid programs. So we have this PACE program, which we actually had a webinar last week. So if you are curious about the PACE, which is the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, and so the name is self-explanatory. It's a program for all-inclusive care for the elderly, and it ideally it pays for everything. They come up with a plan of care, and then it pays for everything as part of that plan of care. And so it's a real nice program. So we had someone from the local PACE office was our guest last week. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go back and watch our webinar from last time, and that will be on our Facebook and our YouTube page. And so we're going to talk about that. So what can PACE cover? Well, ideally, PACE is where you're in your home and they're providing assistance and care and support for in your home. Now, sometimes they're going to have daycare and they're going to take you there and you're going to have some day programs and things like that, but you're living in your home. Well, what about if your home is independent living? Well, yes, you can get PACE in independent living. Now remember, we're going to come back and explain why you maybe should be able to qualify for Medicaid. I promise I will explain all of that. I just want to go through the programs first. So if you're living independent living and that's your home, then you could have PACE in addition to the independent living. You would pay for the room and board. PACE would pay for the care. Adult foster care, that's a possibility. So adult foster care, sometimes let's say that's your home. Well, they're often providing some level of care or supervision or support, and PACE can work with them. It's going to provide that additional care and additional support and additional coverage. So that certainly is a possibility. Now, what about these next three? Is PACE, the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, going to pay for assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing home? And the answer is maybe, but not unless the circumstances are also right. So in other words, they would have had to accept you into the program, and at some later date, your care needs increased so that you had to be in memory care, assisted living, or skilled nursing. And that was based on a determination by their team of experts, their plan of care. And if under their plan of care, they say you need nursing home, you need skilled nursing, or you need memory care, then yes, PACE will cover it. You would just have to pay for the room and board portion of it. However, they're not going to accept you into the program if that's what you need right now. If you, in fact, cannot live in your home or independent living or adult foster care, you need to live in memory care, you need to live in a skilled nursing facility, they're not going to accept you in the program. If you're already in the program and then you advance to that, then yes, that would be covered. So it's a real nice program, real flexible program. The next one is what we call My Choice Waiver. So often when people will say Medicaid, they're thinking this My Choice Waiver program, and you'll see there's some specific unique things about it. But this My Choice Waiver program, again, is intended to be a home care program. They're going to provide a certain number of hours of care in your home. But your home is wherever your home is, wherever you live. So certainly if it's home with care, yes. Now they're not going to pay for your food, or there might be other programs that could pay for Meals on Wheels or things like that, but not the waiver program. The waiver program is going to pay for a certain number of hours of care, potentially per day or per week. But what if your home is in independent living? Then yes, if your home is in independent living, you're still paying for the independent living. You're paying for room and board, but then you can supplement, you can get the care provided by the waiver program. Adult foster care. There's a possibility. Now, the problem is that adult foster care, the assisted living, or the memory care, they have to participate in the program. Okay, so you can't just pick any memory care, assisted living, or adult foster care and just say, I want to go there, and then I want waiver to pay or Medicaid to pay for part of the for the care cost part of it. I'll pay for room and board, they pay for the care. That won't work in just any place. The care place, the memory care, the assisted living, the adult foster care has to participate in the program. And unfortunately in this area, there's not that many that do, okay? So hopefully that'll change and that'll increase. But that is, an issue that we have. Finally, we have this last column, Medicaid nursing home. Okay, this is an important column, and the reason is you see all these no's, you say, well, why is that the important column? And the answer is because of this one. This column right here that says, this column right here that says, let's open, okay, I see right here. Well, I'll play around with that later, but this column here that says skilled nursing facility, and you go all the way across and says, yes, that's covered. What's the difference between PACE and waiver and nursing home? Well, the Medicaid that covers nursing home not only covers the care costs, but it covers room and board. Okay, so it covers everything. You will have a copay or a patient pay amount as it relates to this. And your copay or patient pay amount is going to be based on your income, your Social Security, your pension. Okay, we're going to talk about assets and all of that. So let's say, just as an example, you get $1,000 a month in Social Security and $1,000 a month in pension. Well, they'll pay for everything at the cost of the nursing home, but then your copay or patient pay amount is going to be, say, $1,800 or something like that. There's going to be a couple of exemptions for you from your pension and Social Security, but basically you can pay for it. It doesn't matter how expensive the place is. Now, what's really interesting about this, skilled nursing facilities are the most expensive care typically. So it can go from anywhere from $8,000 a month, there's even a few around here that are a little bit less than $8,000 a month, up to $14,000 a month. And if you're on Medicaid in a skilled care facility, the most you could ever have to pay is your copay, which is that portion of your pension and Social Security. So you're always going to have enough money to do it. You're never with these other programs with PACE and waiver, you still have to pay for your room and board. And so sometimes that can be troublesome. If you have very low income, that can be very problematic. Over here, it doesn't matter what your income is, doesn't matter how expensive the facility is. Now, all skilled nursing facilities in Genesee County, Lapeer County, Shiawassee County, all skilled nursing facilities in those counties accept Medicaid. And so it's not well known, but they do. And so it doesn't matter how expensive it is. So whether it's the most expensive or it's the least expensive, your cost is going to be the same. Now, Oakland County is going to be a little bit different. And some other counties in the state of Michigan will be a little bit different. Most of the nursing homes are going to accept Medicaid. There are a few that don't. But most of them do. I think there's only like 5% of the skilled nursing home beds in Michigan that don't accept Medicaid. All right. That's a whole lot of information, and I haven't even gotten into how to qualify yet, but I wanted to go through that, and if your head is spinning, that's okay. So if you're faced with this situation, if you're faced with this crisis, because there's a loved one that needs care and you're not sure where to start, this is a good chart. This is a good place to start. But how do you sort through all of this? And the answer is, it's actually one of the services that we provide. It's one of the things that we do at Mannor Law Group is we help you figure out, okay, with your specific circumstances, where do we fit into this chart? How are we going to pay for care? What level of care do we need? That is one of the services that we offer. We even have a nurse on staff here, not to provide nursing, but to provide advocacy. Okay, and so the idea here is you're not out there on your own. We are here for you. We are here for you to help you sort through all of this. And if this was at all confusing when I went through this chart, that's okay, because it really is confusing. What I want you to know is if and when that time comes up, we've got to figure out what level of care we need and how we're going to pay for that. That is a service that we provide. All right, so let's talk about the first one. So remember the three things were veterans benefits, nursing home Medicaid, and home care Medicaid. So I'm going to cover them in that order. So that's the big picture of what covers when and how do we pay for what and under what circumstances can, or what, what's living setting do you have to be in to have it covered. So let's start with veterans benefits. The nice thing about veterans benefits, so on the one hand, it's cash, so it works in every setting, which is great. On the other hand, not everybody's going to be eligible for it, right? So we're going to talk about eligibility and say, okay, who can get this money? Who would be eligible? The nice thing about it is that it can help pay for independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing home, home care, pay for a family member to provide care. It's very flexible, okay? It's weird that they call it a pension benefit because it's not, you don't have to have retired from the military to get this pension. In fact, you only have to have served for 90 days and you could still qualify for this pension. So don't get confused or don't get distracted by some of the words that the VA uses. Often people will call this program the aid and attendance program. But the VA actually calls it their improved pension program. And so just be aware of that there's certain terms that the VA uses, even the word income. When you and I have a pretty good idea of what the word income means, pension and Social Security, the VA uses a different term. They say income, for VA purposes, is pension and Social Security minus what you're paying out for care. So minus what you're paying out for independent living or assisted living or nursing home or in-home care, paying for your granddaughter to come and help you. And so that's a different definition of income. Like we wouldn't think of that as income. So if you make $2,000 a month, but you're paying out $2,500 a month for independent living, then your income is zero, according to the VA. Now we got to get into the details of that as it relates to independent living. But again, that's what we're here for, to help you sort through all of this. So how do you qualify? Well, you have to have served during a period of war. Okay, so I'm going to talk about those period of wars. We'll put those up on the screen in a second here. We've got a brochure we can send you out on this. But, Vietnam, Korea, Gulf War, obviously World War II, or you have to be the widow of a veteran who served, a widow or widower of a veteran that served in one of those time periods. So sometimes people will ask, well, what about between Korea and Vietnam? I'm going to show you the dates, so double check the dates, because sometimes you think it's not a wartime period, and according to the rules it is. But yeah, if you served in between, it doesn't count. Even if you served in the Cuban Missile Crisis, it doesn't count. What if you served in the reserves? Well, unless you were activated, it doesn't count. It has to be in active duty for at least 1 day during a period of war. What if you served in the National Guard? Again, unless you were activated by the federal government, it doesn't count. You have to have at least 1 day of active duty during a period of war. Okay, you have to have a total of 90 days of service. I had one gentleman that we worked with several years ago, and he had been told for years that he didn't qualify for this program. And I said, you know what? Let me just take a look, because they said he didn't qualify by 1 day, that he was 1 day short of that 90-day service period. I said, we can't hurt to let me take a look at your discharge paper. And I counted up the days, and whoever talked to him before didn't actually count the days on the calendar. And certain days have 31 days, and certain months have 30 days, and certain months have 31 days. And it turned out he had 90 days on the dot, and he was eligible for this program. So you gotta be specific. You gotta look at the nuance. You have to have a discharge of something other than dishonorable. So a general discharge would be fine. It's not a dishonorable discharge. And you have to have unreimbursed medical expenses that come close to or exceed your income. What do I mean by that? So let's say you make $2,000 a month in income, and you're paying your granddaughter $100 a month to help you out with picking up groceries and things like that. Well, that's not going to be enough, right? That you're not spending enough. Well, what if you're spending $2,000 a month on a home health aide? You're hiring one of the home health companies, or you moved into an independent living and you're spending more than $2,000 a month, in assisted living, you're spending more than $2,000 a month, then you definitely qualify. So unreimbursed medical expenses, including long-term care expenses, including sometimes rent or room and board, come close to or exceed your income. Income meaning pension and Social Security. Then we got to look at assets. So a couple of years ago, they changed the rules on assets, so we're going to take a look at that. The assets that you're allowed to keep, you can keep a house with up to 2 acres. Doesn't matter what the value of the house is. Again, VA comes up with some strange rules, right? And so you could have a $3 million house on 1.5 acres, and you're still eligible. Weird rule, but it is the rule. All right, you can have $127,000 in other assets, and that could include a second house, could include additional acreage, could include money, could include life insurance, could include any number of things. Oddly, it does not include cars and things like that. So you could have multiple cars, and it's not probably going to count against you. The new rules are any gifting that you've done, given away money after October 18th of 2018, they're going to have a penalty calculation. And so that gets messy. So this is another reason why I strongly suggest you don't try to hide money or give money away. Some people say, oh, I'm just going to give the money to my kids and they'll hold on to it for me. Or I'm going to take the money, I'm going to put it in my safe or something like that. Two things. Number one is that's illegal because if you try to apply for one of these programs and you don't tell them about the money, then you've committed a felony. Secondly, is that they could probably find it. You know, the government knows a whole lot about us these days, all the privacy things with regard to the government. And so bottom line is pretty good chance they're going to see that transaction in your bank statement somewhere. They're going to see that you received money and where did that money go? And then you have to answer that question. Sometimes people will say, well, how do they know I didn't spend it? Or how do they know I didn't lose it at a casino or something like that? And the answer is, unfortunately, when it comes to these things, this Veterans Benefits and Medicaid, the proof is on you. So they don't have to prove that you didn't spend it or that you didn't waste it at a casino. You do. And so they just say, what happened to this money? And then you have to prove what happened to the money. So therefore, there's not really a way to hide money like that. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. No transfers within 3 years. That's the whole gifting thing. And certain annuities. So the idea of the annuity, and it's only annuities purchased after October 18th of 2018, but particularly the type of annuity that pays a monthly amount out to you. So if you already have one of those annuities, you had it prior to 2018, not a problem. It got grandfathered in. If you're looking at buying one of those, you may want to consult with us and get some advice to make sure that's not going to disqualify you from some of these programs that we're talking about. And so the thing is, so what can we do if you have more than that? And the answer is, there's different legal programs that we have that we can put in place so that we can protect those assets. Particularly, sometimes people who have heard me talk about this lockbox trust or asset protection trust. The only problem with that is with veterans benefits, we have to do that 3 years in advance. We have to do it 3 years before we apply for those veterans benefits. So when people are interested in this, it's something that we want to do now, or before we absolutely need it. So it's just something to consider. All right, what else? Can you protect assets? Legal planning must be completed 3 years before you apply for benefits. These are the dates of service. So you see the dates for Vietnam. We have World War II. There's always some cleanup period after the war was actually over. Korean conflict through January 31st, 1955. Vietnam era. And this one's a little weird. 64, August of 64 through May of 75. But then there's this other time. In country means you were in Vietnam or in the blue water or brown water of Vietnam, meaning either the waters of Vietnam or outside of the waters of Vietnam in they call it the blue water area. But the bottom line is you have to have served in the Vietnam arena if you want to qualify based on February 1961 through August of 64. Otherwise, anybody that served after August 5th of 64 through May 7th of 75, you're already eligible. You don't have to have served in Vietnam. Other than that one little category, you don't have to have been in the war. You could have been in Germany. You could have been in the United States. You could have been anywhere. You don't have to have served in the war. These are the amounts for 2020. These are monthly amounts. These are tax-free monthly amounts. So for a veteran with a spouse, so a dependent means spouse typically, you could get an extra $22.66 per month to help pay for care. Okay. What about a surviving spouse? Well, an extra $1,230 per month. So you see those numbers there. All right, getting back to my level of care description. So that was this section here where it talks about VA, and it says all of them except for the hospital. We can use the care that's provided there to help qualify for VA. We kind of talked about insurance. It's not really going to pay for long-term care. So now we're looking at PACE, waiver, and nursing home. So we're going to start with nursing home. Now, here's the thing on this. I'm going to talk about this from the standpoint of all three of these. So if you remember back on my original graph that I told you the three items here, it was veterans benefits, nursing home, Medicaid, and home care Medicaid. With regard to the last two, the most relevant thing is that word Medicaid. Okay, the most relevant word is that word Medicaid, because the first thing is we got to qualify for Medicaid. So I'm going to spend the bulk of the rest of the time we have talking about how we're going to qualify for Medicaid. And it's going to apply to both nursing home and in-home care. It's just the home care one has an additional income requirement. All right, so we're going to talk about that in a second. But let's talk about this. So if it's Medicaid, what can you keep? All right, so this is, first of all, I like to put a big X on this, right? This is what you can find out if you Google it, right? This is what you can find out if you ask the barber or if you ask, lots of people. This is the default rules. Remember how the default rules, rich people don't follow the default rules when it comes to taxes, right? They pay less taxes. Well, we don't have to follow the default rules when it comes to Medicaid or veterans benefits. We're following the rules, but built within the rules, built within the law, are different options and strategies and safe harbors where we can protect assets. So this is basically if you don't do anything to protect yourself, which is unfortunately what most people do. Most people do nothing to protect themselves and they potentially lose everything, because as you can see, you potentially could lose everything. We're going to go through this, but remember, this is not where you should be, right? This is where, if we're even saying the word Medicaid, you really should call our office up and we can walk you through, okay, what type of Medicaid are we looking at? How are we going to qualify? What can we protect? But if we're even, contemplating that, and the key time to do that is before you spend down all the assets. Sometimes people will come to me and they were told you got to spend down all your assets, and then they do, and they still get denied Medicaid. Are we going to help them? Of course, but boy, it's going to be a heck of a lot harder to help you fix a problem when there's no assets there, and potentially you can't even afford to pay us. So the bottom line is we want to be looking at Medicaid at the beginning of the care needs, not after you've spent a bunch of money. Sometimes people hear, if you've heard the word spend down, a lot of people say, oh, well, we're going to spend down for a couple of years, and then we're going to come see you at Mannor Law Group. And the answer is no. You want to come in before you spend down for a couple of years, because a lot of people think, oh, the spend down just means I got to spend it down. We got to pay for care for 2 years. I did the math. We just got to pay the care. The answer is spend down as it relates to Medicaid only helps you if you're spending it down in the right fashion, in the strategically correct fashion. And so you could be spending down all the assets thinking you're doing exactly what you're told. And at the end of that spend down, they say you still don't qualify for Medicaid. And this happens all of the time. So the idea, as soon as somebody needs care, they really need to get the proper legal advice. So this is what happens if we don't do things to protect ourselves. And in a second, I'll talk to you about what it is if you do protect yourself. So you can keep the house in Michigan, not in every state, but in Michigan, you can keep the house and be on Medicaid, but it's subject to them taking it through a state recovery or the proceeds from it from a state recovery after you die. This is an important thing. Now, there's different rules that we can follow to make sure the house is not going to be subject to a state recovery, that we protect the house forever, but it's not automatic. You would think some of these protections that they build in the law, they would make them automatic. They'd say, okay, if we don't want to impoverish the spouse, why don't we make those spousal safe harbors automatic? Well, they're not. They don't do that. Government doesn't do it that way, right? And so the house is not automatically protected. In fact, it's not protected, and we have to specifically make sure it is. It's not that difficult to protect the house from what they call a state recovery, but they can take the proceeds after you die. But we've got another problem, and this is why there's an asterisk here. They let you keep the house, but they don't leave you any money to pay for it. Because from your income, they're going to leave you with $2 a day. $2 a day, and in your bank account, less than $2,000 in total countable assets. So $2 a day, $60 a month, right? $60 a month is all the. Is $60 a month going to be enough to pay for the taxes and insurance and upkeep and mowing the lawn and doing the snow removal and all that on the house? And the answer is of course not. So how are we going to pay for the house? Sometimes the kids will say, well, okay, well, they're taking all mom's money from income, so we're going to go ahead and we'll pay the taxes and insurance on the house. And then what happens? You die, and they take the proceeds from the house. Kid's going to get reimbursed? Probably not unless they documented it properly. Okay, so you can have one car. That's unlike veterans benefits where you can have multiple cars, but one car, one prepaid funeral, one life insurance policy with a face value of no more than $1,500. Technically, you could have even more than one as long as the face value is under $1,500. Household goods. They let you keep your wedding ring. They let you keep your TV. Without good planning, you could lose pretty much everything else. Okay. So just to be clear, this is what we should not be doing. So many people do it. They just let the default happen. If you know of anybody that's talking about Medicaid or in a nursing home, you're gonna do them a huge favor by sending them our way, and we can kind of walk them through it and what they can do to protect themselves. Even if they just have a house, even if they don't have any assets, but they just have a house. Some people say, oh, you don't have to worry about that. No, you do, because they're gonna come back and take it later if we don't protect it. All right, so here's some examples of what we can do with even some minimal planning, what we call extraordinary powers. For a married couple where one spouse needs either waiver, PACE, or nursing home, typically we can maximize the safe harbors for the non-nursing home spouse or the non-sick spouse or the healthier spouse, because sometimes the other spouse is kind of sick too, but maximize those safe harbors, and we usually can protect 100% of the assets in favor of the healthy spouse. 100% of the assets, the house, the bank account, the investment, the retirement accounts, all of that, maybe even the cottage up north. Typically, we can protect everything in favor of the healthy spouse. Now, let's be realistic here. If somebody has $7 million, are we going to do this? No, of course not. If you have $7 million, we're not going to want you to get on Medicaid. If you got $1 million, we might not want you to be on Medicaid. Probably not. But the bottom line is, that's not typically the clients that we have. We have middle-class folks that have a house and maybe saved up a little bit of money, and we don't want to impoverish the spouse. Well, guess what? Good news. There's safe harbors in the law, and if you know how to use them, we can protect the assets. If one spouse has to go in a nursing home, we're going to make sure the other spouse doesn't go broke. In fact, we're going to protect all of the assets in favor of the healthy spouse, or what they call the community spouse. What if it's a single person? Well, for a single person, worst case scenario, we can usually protect the house 100%, the car 100%, and about 50% of everything else. Often we can do better than that, but that's a heck of a lot better than this other screen, right? This is the other screen where you have to spend down to $2,000. So I can, with a little bit of planning with our help, we can protect the house, car, and at least 50% of everything else typically. The alternative is spend down to $2,000. All right, so the last section that I want to talk about, so those programs, and see how we talked about these different programs, the My Choice Waiver Program, which pays for home care, the PACE program, which is the program for all-inclusive care for the elderly. Those two programs have an additional requirement, and that additional requirement is there's an income limit. All right, this is a shame. Unfortunately, not everybody in Michigan can qualify for the PACE and My Choice Waiver Program. So given this chart, I bet you most of you are going to be, hey, I want that second to the top one. If I need care, I want care in my home, right? Great, I agree. If that's a possibility and it's feasible and we're able to make sure that you get good care there and you got some family support and things like that, best answer. Problem is, when we're trying to pay for it, if we can't qualify for veterans benefits, there's an income limit. So if your personal income, not spousal income, so let's say wife makes $3,000 a month in pension and Social Security, but husband only gets Social Security and it's $1,700. So husband could qualify because husband's income is under the $23.49 per month, $1,700 Social Security. But because wife gets a pension too, then wife would not qualify for this program. Okay, so your individual income has to be under $2,349 per month. This number changes every year. It is indexed, but unfortunately, if you made $2,349.03, they would say you're ineligible for these two programs. What if you made $2,348.99? You're eligible. Does that seem fair to you? It certainly doesn't seem fair to me. And in fact, most states have figured that out, and most states have figured a workaround for this so that we can qualify for care at home, in independent living and assisted living in most states without this income limit. Michigan has not so far. I will tell you, we're trying to get that changed. Savannah mentioned at the beginning that I'm on the executive committee for the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law section. And we have a lobbyist. So we've hired a lobbyist. And one of our top priorities is to try to follow the other states. And many of the other states have found out that they actually spend less money, that they spend less Medicaid money when they allow people with a higher income to qualify for PACE or My Choice or the waiver. It wouldn't be called My Choice in other states. But because why? Because it costs less to keep somebody in their home and then get them the care that way. Nursing homes, they're going to spend more, so they're forcing people that make more than $2,349 individually into a nursing home to qualify for Medicaid. And so many states have figured out, hey, if we put more money into these budgets, the PACE budget, the My Choice waiver budget, that we actually save money overall. We spend less Medicaid dollars overall, which is good for everybody. It's hard to argue that anybody would disagree with or argue with that. If we're spending less money, giving people better choice, but giving people a better quality of life, they get to stay in their home rather than having to go to a nursing home. Those all seem like pretty good things, right? Well, in Michigan, we do have this limit, that we have this income limit. We're working with some key legislators and working with our lobbyists to work on getting that changed. It's not going to be changed this year by any means. Even in the best case scenario, that wouldn't happen in the current environment where we have some other legislative priorities that they have with some of the things going on right now. Now we're going to have some budget issues coming up. This won't happen this year. Even if we can get this change to happen, it'll be a few years. But we're working on it, and hopefully the PACE and My Choice waiver programs will be available to folks that make a little bit more than $23.49 per month. So those are the programs. And Savannah, I'm going to see if we have any questions here.
Yes, we actually do have one question, and I was just getting ready to respond in the chat as well. So we have someone wondering if we take clients from Washington State, or if we can make recommendations for an attorney.
I sure can. Yeah, I can't take the case, I can't take the client, but I can certainly recommend. And so I've been fortunate enough that I've been asked to speak and educate people on different issues, and had this opportunities to speak at national conferences and things like that. And I've developed a pretty good network of folks throughout the country. And so if you just contact the office, you give us some basic details. I always want to know, I don't want to send you to the wrong attorney, so I want to know some basic details. Contact the office, give us some basic details about the situation and the geographic area within Washington State, and we will likely be able to find you. Now, this is a pretty specific and precise area of law, and so I can't always guarantee that we're going to find you a attorney that's within 20 minutes of the people that you're wanting to help out there. Sometimes the best attorneys, you might have to drive an hour to go see them, but it's worth it. So just let us know the details, and we will do our best to find you somebody as close as possible that is qualified and capable to deal with these issues.
Thanks, Bob. And we actually have another question. So the question is, I take care of my father's finances and bill paying. For this, he pays me $1,000 per month for 10 months. Is this considered a gift for Medicaid lookback?
Yes. Unfortunately, that is currently considered a gift for Medicaid lookback. However, Uh, for everything, there is a solution, right? And so that's why lawyers are here. If we document it properly and we get the proper signatures, proper notaries, the doctor usually has to sign off on it. We absolutely can come up with something that is going to allow that to continue and not be penalized for that. I always say, so you're saying you're already doing this, what about last month? I always say we can't worry too much about what happened last month. We can only talk about tomorrow. Okay, we can fix tomorrow, we can't fix yesterday. So don't worry too much about yesterday. We can find creative solutions to that too. But going forward, we should probably do maybe a family care contract, or there's other terminology that we can use. It's relatively straightforward, not overly costly, but it also gives us an opportunity to look at the bigger picture and make sure everything else is set up for Dad's circumstances, make sure that he's well set up for in other ways. But in particular, in that if we're paying anything to a child on a regular basis, we should document it. It's relatively, for us, it's relatively straightforward and relatively inexpensive for you. When I say it's relatively straightforward, it's not straightforward at all. We just do enough of them that it becomes straightforward for us to draft these documents. But the hoops that they make us jump through to draft that document, there's a lot of attorneys that won't do them because they're so complicated and they're so red tape that a lot of attorneys are afraid to do them because they want to, if they make a mistake, it could be a big problem for the attorney. We do them all the time, and so we're able to do them relatively inexpensively. But it's certainly something that if we're paying a family member or paying anybody else for help with finances, help with care, anything like that, that we're going to want to document it, probably in a family care contract, or we can determine, we can call it something else, but there is a process for making sure that you're not going to get penalized for that. Any other questions?
All right, that is the last question today. Thank you, Bob.
All right, so one of the things, Savannah's going to take over in a second here, and she's going to talk to you about how to make an appointment with us. But I want to encourage you that it's not just about, certainly if you've got somebody that's facing a current crisis, and by current crisis, I mean they need care. They need home care, they need assisted living, memory care, nursing home, anything like that. It would be worthwhile to have us do an assessment, to do a consult. There is a small fee for it because we're giving you concrete, accurate legal advice specific to your circumstances. I'm not a fill-in-the-blank kind of an attorney. We're going to be very specific to your needs, and we got to charge you for that. We'd go broke if we didn't, right? So if there's an existing situation where somebody needs care, it's going to be well worth the minimal cost to have us do it. In order to get that started, we just do a quick free interview. So there's no cost for us to get that started, and that quick free interview is us just to find out what your needs are and make sure that you're talking to the right attorney and things like that. But then if you go forward with the consult, there's a small cost for that. For everybody else that just kind of wants an update, they want to make sure that they have their ducks in a row. There's also that free interview, that free 15-minute interview that Savannah's going to talk to you about. But then sometimes that initial appointment will waive the fee for that. So if we're having to give specific legal advice about specifically a current circumstance, then there's likely going to be a consult fee for that. If you're just preparing for the future, often we'll be able to waive that consult fee. But the way that we determine whether we can do that or not is that free 15-minute interview that Savannah's going to talk to you about. So Savannah, I'm going to have you take it over, but I just want to encourage everybody, we're here to help. And whether you're just worried about this for the future or worried about it for a parent, or you have a specific circumstance now, I really encourage you to contact us. So Savannah, I'll have you explain all of that.
All right, before you leave, Bob, we actually have one last question that just popped through at the last second, so we'll go ahead and count it. And I think this one won't take you too long to explain. But someone wants to know if a beneficiary deed protects a house.
Okay, so there's no such thing as a beneficiary deed in Michigan. There's things called a ladybird deed or a life estate deed. There's a variety of different types of deeds. There's no such thing as specifically a beneficiary deed in the state of Michigan. But the answer to that question is the standard legal answer for any lawyer to give any question, which is it depends. I've seen lots of deeds that would qualify under that category of beneficiary deed that absolutely will not protect the house, but in many cases it will. We have to look at the specific circumstances, and I think they're overused. I think lawyers even overuse them to the extent that they say, they went to a conference one time that said if you use a ladybird deed to protect from the nursing home, and then I see the exact circumstances and it does not protect it from the nursing home because of the unique circumstances of that particular family. There are no blanket answers when it comes to this stuff. It just requires us taking a look at the deed, and then we can answer the question, which is relatively straightforward and simple, and it's easy to fix if there's anything wrong with it. But the bottom line is that's not that, saying, will the beneficiary deed or beneficiary type of the deed protect it from the nursing home? The answer is not necessarily. So again, please consider setting up an appointment, and Savannah will give you some instructions.
Thanks, Bob. And thanks again to everyone who joined us on today's webinar. As Bob mentioned, we do have an easy way for you to get started working with our team. Check your email inbox after today's meeting. You should already have an email with instructions on scheduling that 15-minute interview call that Bob spoke of earlier. Now remember, there's no cost to that 15-minute phone call, and there's no risk. You're just calling, having a conversation, and you'll be able to know from the end of that conversation if this is a way for you to get some help, and if not, we'll direct you in a place that or in the direction of where you can find help if we aren't able to do that. So that's all for today. Again, be sure to check your email, click the button to schedule that 15-minute appointment, and be sure to check your email in the next couple of days for your next invite for next week's webinar Wednesday. Thank you so much and have a great day.